It's now my great pleasure to introduce Mr. Pratt from Visy. Now, everybody can read Mr. Pratt's biography in the program, but I just wanted to introduce Mr. Pratt a slightly different way. So I run my own business, and it's people like Mr. Pratt that pave the way for little people like me to have hope and see that you can actually make a monumental difference. I mean, it blows me away what this gentleman has done with his business. He's a philanthropist, an entrepreneur, a businessman. I don't know how he does it. I'm looking forward to hearing from him. He's flown in yesterday from California, where he ran a global food forum. I was lucky enough to speak at the Global Food Forum in Melbourne a couple of years ago. So please join me in welcoming Mr. Pratt.
Thanks, Catherine. Thanks, everyone, for that welcome. And I'm very grateful to our farmers that 70% of our customers at Visy are in the food industry. Congratulations on the $60 billion, on the way to $100 billion. It's a record. And I express solidarity with those affected by the drought. Our world-class farmers, Visy and the Pratt Foundation, have topped up our contribution to the Foundation for Rural and Regional Renewal to $4 million for targeted farmer social support. The latest $100,000 pledge will go towards mental health and counselling services in the Riverina. We also teamed up with Food Bank Australia to donate food hamper cartons, and many Visy employees are pitching in. I'd like to acknowledge the Morrison government's leadership addressing the crisis with things like doubling the low-interest loans for farmers to $2 million and appointing Major General Stephen Day as the drought coordinator. Although we aren't in the water industry, over the last 20 years, Pratt Foundation's invested over $20 million in philanthropy and research for Australia's water management. For example, the $8 million Pratt Water Study to devise water-saving methods in the Murrumbidgee Valley, like developing plastic piping to replace open channels to reduce evaporation, mapping underground water resources for storage to make the most of flood flows in the dry times, and finance options for better water trading to give farmers more options, more control over them. In addition to this $8 million, we contributed over $5 million in water-saving technology, including drip irrigation, supporting the entry of pioneers like NFF into Australia, $1 million for former Governor-General Mike Jeffries' Soils for Life program, and $6 million to Israel universities for research into desalinisation using brackish water, and we brought Israeli researchers to meet with CSIRO people. So these were about finding new methods, new ideas for water management. Now let's talk about the next 20 years. Well, of course, there's no silver bullet, and getting it right will require a constancy of focus and an all of government, all of society approach. So here's my 5-point plan. Firstly, we need to make more use of our underground water resources. Some of our best pastoral and farming land lies right on top of the Great Artesian Basin, which holds 6,000 trillion litres of water. It holds 10 times the water that we need each year, and Australia has so much natural water storage capacity that the floods in Australia from the big wet in 2011 caused the world's oceans to fall by 3 millimetres. All that water was trapped on and under Australia. I believe the Great Artesian Basin and the other underground resources could produce much of what we need to grow with carefully sited infrastructure. And some underground water is salty, so it can't all be used for irrigation, but Israel processes brackish water for agriculture, and solar-powered desal equipment combined with bore equipment could yield fresh water. It's already happening at Sundrop Farms, and they're using seawater, which is even saltier than groundwater. And some great water conservation work's already been done, like the government's bore capping program to stop gushing, but to harness that water for food growing, we need new infrastructure. And when we do get those flooding rains, We need to regenerate our underground water reserves by flood storages. It can cost less than water surface dam storage with lower evaporation and free filtration. Secondly, we need to put more investment into regional water infrastructure. If we can put $30 billion into Sydney's rail, rural Australia deserves a lot too. With Aussie super funds holding $3 trillion, that's surely one potential way to deliver new water and food investment. I would add that financing some form of weatherproofing along the lines of Costa's glass houses, or at least cover many crops, would make our farms more resilient as well. Thirdly, sustainable soil practices, and we all know that when soils are healthy and have lots of organic matter, they hold water for longer and cuts fertiliser cost. And Mike Jeffrey's work that we've supported promotes better water retention, less runoff, soil salinisation through rotational grazing, sustains healthy vegetation, and there's a role for governments to help fund soil programs like this. Fourthly, we should build stronger links between California, Australia and Israel, tap each other's ideas. On productivity, regards those three countries, on-farm robotics can help solve the backpacker shortage problem. And while we're at it, let's look at eliminating the backpackers tax. It's one of the things that has been said to me. And this is essential if we want to assure that no fruit is being left behind because of lack of labour to pick it. And fifthly, we need to double the value of our exports. How would we do that? Well, with 3 billion people coming into Asia's middle class, they can afford protein, beef, dairy, nuts, and more than that, they want the safe, clean food brand of Australia, and that our added value, high quality, brings. Chinese buyers often don't trust the quality of Chinese food, and these are all ways that we can add value in exports. And of course, added value horticulture is a huge part of that as well. And that's why we started the national conversation in 2013 called the Global Food Forum to promote doubling the value of our food exports by 2030, which ironically is also to 100 billion. And since then, our food exports have grown by 8% a year, which is double Australia's GDP growth, so it's real growth as well. And our exports of food to the booming middle classes of Asia grew by 51% last year, which vindicates those great free trade agreements. One of the special features of this is the counter-seasonality, us shipping our summer fruit to Japanese winters, etc., or Chinese winters, and this counter-seasonality pushed citrus exports to China up by 78% last year. Roger Corbett said that whoever cracks the code on supply chain traceability will lead the way in our food supply revolution, which can ensure we get our food safely and reliable to people's tables, from the abattoir and the vine right to home, with more profit to growers, taking out the transit middlemen and double handling costs. So thank you very much again. I hope this Congress and every business represented here can focus on realising the huge opportunities available to us. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pratt. It's wonderful to stand here and listen to people like that. And I guess I could sum up Mr. Pratt's philanthropic gestures by saying that he really does philanthropy with a difference. He's investing in things that genuinely matter to agriculture and people in rural Australia. His 5 key points were to make more use of underground water, so important. Put more investments into water infrastructure. Sustainable soil practices. Again, it's around water retention, soil health, soil fertility to grow more with what we've got. And doubling the value of our export market. We've got to take advantage of those 3 billion people. I'm looking forward to different speakers sharing with us over the duration of this conference how we can actually capitalise on that. He also mentioned food supply and traceability, and I think tied in with that very nicely is also packaging and making sure that the food that we grow gets to markets really safely. And I'm really excited that Mr. Pratt is here, obviously with a packaging company, and we know that we're in very safe hands.